Okay, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Carol Douglas, the Woodland Development Manager at the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust. And the workshop this afternoon is part of the Heart of the Pennines Forest project. This is a partnership project delivered between the North Pennines AOMB, the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority and the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust, with support from the Forestry Commission and Woodland Trust. So it's a project that is being funded through the DEFRA Trees Call to Action Fund, which is delivered by the Heritage Fund in partnership with the Forestry Commission. So it's a 3-year partnership project, lots of different elements, things like supporting and advising landowners on woodland creation, woodland management. It's going to involve developing a deer monitoring and control strategy. And we also have 4 woodland trainees. And we're also developing some community tree growing schemes. So I know many of you here today may be involved in those community tree growing schemes. And the idea today is that we're going to learn more about the importance of tree health and biosecurity in growing those trees. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Becky Gawthorpe and her team from the Forestry Commission Plant Health Department, and leave it to Becky to introduce yourself and your colleagues.
Thank you, Carol. Hello, everyone. Can I just check that you can all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant, fantastic. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. Just bear with me 1 second while I do that. Make sure I click the right button this time. Okay, so I'm just going to start off by, 1 sec. There we go. Just let me know again. Can someone just let me know if you can see that? I can't see anyone, so you'll have to say yes again.
Yes, we can, Becky.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. So I just wanted to start off by providing a bit of an introduction to the UK Plant Health Service, where our team, the Plant Health Forestry team and the Forestry Commission fit within the UK Plant Health Service, and just briefly introduce you to the speakers for today. So we'll just have a very quick look at the agenda. Now we'll do our best to stick to time. We will finish when we said we will finish, but we might need to just kind of shuffle things around a little bit, but we will stick to time. So we're just obviously doing welcome and introductions. I'll be handing over to Maro to cover basic elements of tree establishment. Then to Nathaniel, who will be looking at current and future tree pests and diseases in your area and a look at reporting. We'll then stop and have a comfort break and some time for discussion. And then we've got a biosecurity and group activity happening. Now, if I do kind of pause or freeze or whatever, just give me a shout, because my internet has just told me that it's a bit unstable, which is was bound to happen. So let's just have a little look. So the UK Plant Health Service. So I'm not sure kind of how many of you are aware of the number of pests and diseases that we're dealing with here in the UK and kind of the issues that we face, but there are many pests and diseases that can seriously damage crops and plants in the UK. And to protect plant health, the UK Plant Health Service sets policy and enforces controls and restrictions on the import, the movement, and also the keeping of certain plants, plant pests and other materials such as soil, for example. And here in the UK Plant Health Service comprises a number of different organisations, including the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, so DEFRA, Welsh Government, Scottish Government, and the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in Northern Ireland, so DERA. In England, DEFRA is further supported by us at the Forestry Commission and also the Animal Plant Health Agency, so AFA, you may have heard them being referred to, and also wider delivery bodies such as Ferroscience, based near York, and Forest Research. So the Forestry Commission, so who are we? For those of you that don't know, we are the government department that's responsible for protecting, expanding and promoting the sustainable management of woodlands, with an aim to increase the value of woodlands to society and the environment. And today we're really going to be focusing in on that protecting element of who we are. So within that UK Plant Health Service kind of banner, we are responsible for plant health, that being forestry, and also forest reproductive materials. We deliver cross-border plant health functions on behalf of the UK government and also the Scottish government and Welsh government. And we also work very closely with Forest Research, who are an agency of the Forestry Commission, and they deliver a strategy on science and innovation on behalf of the 3 nations that I just mentioned. So I thought it would be useful before we start just to run through a couple of definitions that are going to likely come up. So when we refer to pests, plant pests, these can include insects, other invertebrate, bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other pathogens which can affect the health of plants or plant products by either feeding on them or causing disease. You may hear us talk about invasive non-native species. So these are animals or plants that have been introduced either deliberately or accidentally by human activity to an area in which they would not normally occur naturally. And then pest-free area. So this is an area in which a specific pest is absent, which is demonstrated by scientific evidence, and I'll cover this in a little while, and in which, where appropriate, the condition is being officially maintained. So it's the actions that we need to take to demonstrate that we are free from that particular pest, and we're reporting to say that it's not here and it is absent. So our team, the Plant Health Forestry team, so this is our mission statement that you can see here on this slide, and we work to support healthy trees, woods and forests. And to do this, we work together with the agencies that you saw on the previous slides, as well as other partners, stakeholders, colleagues overseas. And together we try to prevent entry in the first instance, provide early detection, and if a pest or disease does manage to make its way in, we try and minimise the impact of them. We also ensure the traceability of forestry planting material. So just to quickly break that down and look at these kind of 3 key points. So prevent entry, as an example, we have border controls. So anybody wanting to import or export certain wood or timber products to or from the UK will have to comply with plant health regulations, restrictions and requirements, and members of our team get involved with all of that. Detect early. So here we're really thinking about surveillance, and we operate an aerial surveillance programme that we carry out annually. We undertake a significant amount of site visits and inspections. We carry out sampling and trapping, pest-free area surveys. We get involved with citizen science. So some of you may be familiar with the Observatory project, which is a volunteer project, which I can touch on later, and also encouraging reporting from members of the public, volunteers like yourself, community groups, professionals, you name it. We want everybody to report, and Nathaniel will be covering that in a little while. And then to minimise impact, this usually results in outbreak management, and this will minimise the impact. Normally, swift action is required to reduce the risk of a pest or disease establishing. So the quicker we can respond, the more chance we have of success. Now, the work that we do is underpinned by a few different things. So we're always carrying out horizon scanning. We have contingency plans in place telling us kind of what we need to do if and when a particular pest or disease arrives, which agencies are going to be involved. And then also regulation. We've got engagement and communication, so very much like what we're doing today, and that's where myself and Emma and AJ, I'll introduce you to in a second, get involved. And then everything is underpinned by science and evidence, and that's where we work very closely with colleagues over at Forest Research. Now, I'm not going to talk you through our team organogram, but I just wanted to give you a very quick idea of kind of the structure of who we are as a team. We've grown significantly in the past few years. Everyone that you can see in kind of reddy pink is our operational side of the team. And that is where Maro, who you'll be hearing from today, sits. So Maro is our plant health officer for the Northeast, and his role covers post-aerial surveillance analysis and outbreak management inland. And he works to provide early detection and to minimise the impacts of harmful tree pests and diseases. Alongside Maro, you've got Nathaniel, who is our plant health support officer for the Northeast, and he conducts inland surveys and tree health inspections. Then the yellow bit of the team is where we've got our GIS specialists, our contracts and surveys manager, and the biosecurity team. And that's where I sit. I'm the biosecurity and awareness manager, so I'm responsible for coordinating our tree health biosecurity program and lead on the production of plant health forestry communications. And then we've got Emma and AJ, who are also with us today. They're our biosecurity officers. Emma's based in the north, AJ in the south, and they're involved with engaging with a range of audiences, developing guidance, input into policy, and disseminating information on biosecurity across the UK. You've then got our amazing admin hub in blue, and then the green squares that you can see are our policy team. So a very, very quick kind of overview of who we are and what we do. And then I'm just going to finish off by showing you a very short video that kind of just ties everything that I've said together. And I probably could have just hit play on this and let this roll out and you wouldn't have had to listen to me. But here we go. I have hopefully ticked the right box, Mike, but do shout out if you can't hear anything when I hit play now. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. That should have stopped. And I'm going to hand straight over to Maro, who will introduce his session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Becky. That's a very thorough introduction. Thank you. I don't even need to introduce myself, but I'll do it again. I'm Mauro Lanfranchi. I'm tree health officer for Yorkshire and the Northeast, and I work alongside Nathaniel to take care of the pest and disease management for Yorkshire and the Northeast up to bordering with Scotland. Today, I thought let me see if I can first of all share my presentation with you. One. How does it look from the other side? Do you see it?
Yeah, it looks fine, Mauro.
Thank you. Okay, so these presentation basic elements of tree establishment from seed to establishment. It will focus mainly on forest seed biosecurity and tree health and establishment. The points are here, risk to forest seed biosecurity. So I'll cover movement of seed and some of the research evidence related to the risk of pest introduction, and then move on to some control methods related to forest seed source. And then one example of a seed-borne tree pathogen, which is Fusarium circinatum, ending this section with plant seed collection, a few slides on planting seed collections. We'll then move on to one of our another main topic, which is the tree species selection and the use of the ecological site classification, ESC. And then we'll finish off with some elements of tree establishment. Right, let's get going then. So movement of seeds and research evidence. So the import and export of tree seeds carries with it the risk of inadvertent introduction of pests and pathogen to unaffected regions. Although the trade in seed of specified trees is regulated, phytosanitary requirements for most tree species are minimal. And these really calls for a better understanding of the microbiome associated with seeds, as well as the understanding of their potential risk with the transport from the source of origin. There are a couple of studies that focused on the risk of forest biosecurity associated with the movement of commercial seeds. On these slides here is a study that demonstrated that highly diverse fungal communities were associated with seed of many different pine species obtained from seed orchards or online distributors in North America and Europe. The fungal diversity differed among more than 20 seedlots tested, and they found 453 potential pathogens in these. So you can imagine the high number of fungal spores that were found in these seedlots. This is another study that, together with focusing on fungi, also focuses on insects, and he assessed nearly 60 traded seedlots of 11 in between conifers and broadleaf tree species from North America, Europe, and Asia. And about 30% of the seedlots contained insect larvae. The conifers mostly contained minute wasps and gold midges in the form of larvae at the larval stage, whereas the broadleaves contained mostly larvae that feed on acorns of oak species, and also coleopteran. So the experiment really here revealed the presence of fungi also, and in all seedlots. And fungi were able to grow in the laboratory on nearly 100% of from the seedlots. So you can imagine every single seedlot had fungi with them. So to summarize, the results of these studies indicate that seeds may pose a greater risk to pest introduction than previously believed or accounted for. And the evidence presented here illustrates an urgent need for plant protection authorities, practitioners, but also general public to recognize the potential risk of introducing harmful pathogen through innocent transport of seeds. Now we move to the control methods. Control methods for seed source. There are treatments that can be used to eliminate or reduce fungi from forest seeds with the objective of obtaining seedlings that are good in vitality and silvicultural quality. The treated seeds then are probably more protected against a pathogen associated with the seed themselves, or that are present in the soil. And also by doing these treatments, you avoid the dissemination of pathogenic microorganisms in areas not yet contaminated. There isn't much in terms of there isn't much available in terms of forestry as opposed to agronomy, as you can expect. But there are three main types of seed treatments. One is chemical, the other is physical, and then biological. So we'll see them quickly. So for chemical treatments, although there are no registered products, the efficiency of chemical treatment of seeds for forest species with the products that are listed here, many of which really I don't know about because this is research, sort of a research field. So the efficiency of these products have been tested on forest seed species, although there's no registered product. Presumably the physical treatment that looks the most promising. Physical treatments such as thermotherapy in water have been the target of recent research, also in forest seeds. And these treatments may confer greater efficiency in the eradication of the pathogen and the germination of seeds. But there are some uncertainty because the efficiency of these treatments also depend on the different sensitivity of hydraulic stress in between the seed itself and the pathogen. So you don't want to lose vitality while you get rid of the pathogen. And in this regard, there's a very relevant to the Britain study that recently has evaluated a double hot water treatment for the eradication of Hymenocipus fraxinus, which is the spores that cause ash dieback. So these double hot treatment really proved to be an efficient and low-cost, low-tech approach for the eradication of Hymenocipus fraxinus from the ash fruits. So these is probably good news, although is the wrong, probably the wrong example. We all know that if we grow a perfectly healthy seed of ash, it's going to be diseased in not too long in Britain. But the research effort is promising with respect to many other species currently, so good. And then for fun, we got the biological treatments. In the agricultural area, there are already commercial products produced from fungal isolates, for example, based on species of Trichoderma, which is a fungi that can be used to control pathogens found in seeds and soil. However, such information is lacking for forest seeds. Here as well, the application of secondary compounds produced by the plant itself can also provide an alternative for the control of seed-associated pathogens. For example, the ethanolic extracts from the root system and fresh leaf of a Brazilian species called Ottonia martiana presented antifungal activity in relation to the mycelial development, so that the mycelium develops from the spores of the pathogen Fusarium, which is very relevant to us. We'll see it in a minute. Fusarium oxysporum in this case is the Fusarium wilt of bananas, but Fusarium as a genus of fungi is relevant to the UK. We'll see it in a minute. So promising research, but not quite there to the final sort of consumer yet. Also, essential oils of medicinal plant have shown a positive effect in the control of phytopathogens in the fungitoxid action by inhibiting the mycelial growth and the germination of the spores. So the effects of different aqueous extracts was also analyzed in other seeds. Major fungal incidents were Fusarium and other species as well. In these research, for example, tobacco extract controlled the incidence of Fusarium species and many other species as well. We're talking about Fusarium, and I wanted to give you an example of how potentially the movement of seeds could let's say, cause problems to the ecology of a landscape. In this case, we see a seed-borne tree pathogen, which is called, again, Fusarium, but Fusarium ciocinatum, which is known to cause pitch canker of pine. It's part of a wider we call it division, ascomycetes, and includes a number of familiar and economically important fungi, such as Cholera, ash dieback, the powdery mildews, Panama disease of bananas, which we have seen before, but also sweet chestnut blight and Dutch elm disease. Oops. I knew it would happen. Okay. So in its natural environment on the west coast of the United States, Pine radiata has been decimated by an epidemic outbreak of pinch canker caused by Fusarium ciocinatum. This fungi is listed among the species recommended for regulation as a quarantine pest in Europe, and it is notifiable but not present yet in the UK, and is part of our quarantine pest survey. The European Food and Safety Authority considers the probability of new introduction into the EU very likely via contaminated seeds, wood material, soil, growing substrates, natural means such as wind, rain, insects, and other animals carrying spores, but also human activities such as the transport of materials and the movement of seeds as well. Also, the UK has a suitable tree host and climate. So pitch canker is named like that because of the copious exudation of resin from infected parts. The disease deforms and kills the trees in plantation and in landscapes, and also suppresses the height and volume growth of survivors, and it kills the seedlings in nurseries. The greatest damage occurs among saplings and young trees in seed orchards and plantations. And the mortality rates of up to 25% have been occurring in plantations. With regards to the UK, species such as Scots pine, Corsican pine, lodgepole pine are grown commercially for the timber trade in the UK. So there could be an ecological and economic effect on businesses and jobs which use these species. The pathogen itself has spread from its original distribution and has been introduced to South America, South Africa, and Southern Europe. And it's one of the major diseases of pine in the southeastern coast of the United States. Fusarium circinatum has got over 60 host species. These are all susceptible to the pathogen, and it also causes diseases on Douglas fir and many species of spruce and also larch. So the continuous surveillance of reproductive material, nurseries and plantation, and prompt control measure and realistic contingency plans will be important to limit the disease spread. Common symptoms for Fusarium circinatum are shoot dieback, limb and trunk cankers, and depending in part on the host species. The pitch canker fungus infects cones and seeds, and it is probably transmitted into nurseries with seed. So pine seedlings in nurseries and new plantation may be killed as resinous lesions develop on the lower stem, root collar, and taproot. Disease seedling often occur in cluster where the pathogen is spread from an initially diseased individual. So this was a sort of a quick introduction on Fusarium, and particularly the relevance that biosecurity has on the seed source, and particularly the forest seed source. I'm now wanting to move on into looking at seeds collection and determining seed quantities. Species which bear ripe seed in adequate quantities at all time are few, and some species bear seed throughout the year, but only a little at any one time, and these make seed collection slow and expensive. In the majority of species, the seedling season is concentrated within a few weeks to collect as much crop as possible within the short period of time while the seeds are mature, but they have not yet fallen or deteriorated. So the collection must be done quickly to avoid losses from animals, fungi, or premature germination. Collection in accessible plantation reduces the need for careful preparation, but on the opposite, collection in inaccessible, multi-specific, many species of trees in natural forest or sampling a number of different seed sources requires very careful planning. Now, determining seed quantities. Seed users need to define the quantity of seed needed of each species, provenance, or stand. And for this, it is necessary to know the area of plantation to be established annually and the initial spacing to be used, together with an estimate of losses and culls in the nursery or replacement needed after planting to achieve the full stocking of the number of germinated seedlings to be expected from each kilograms of seed sown. If you look at the chart on the slide here, it basically shows the number of trees needed planting according to a set spacing. So here is, for example, 3 by 2 meters, and then the replacing for field casualties and additionally losses and culls from the nursery. And all that refers back to the area of plantation that needs to be the area of plantation and also the resulting kilograms of seeds needed. So information on planting area and individual spacing is usually available from plantation management plans, and there is also available in literature some guidance on the germination rates. Whenever possible, local experience on variation of seeds is also important, particularly with regards to provenance. Seed weight can change significantly in between according to where the seed is being planted or the provenance of the seed itself. For species which show periodicity in seeding, there are big advantages in acquiring, collecting larger amounts of seeds in a single good year, when these seeds will be better in quality if the local seed storage facilities are adequate. And knowledge is needed for each species of provenance on both the likely interval in between good seed years and the rate of loss of viability of the seed under existing storage conditions. Now, determining the best dates for collection. Some species in the exotic area, for example, they carry some ripe seeds at all time. In other species, and especially in temperate zones, with marked distinction between, let's say, summer and winter, ripe seeds is born for a limited period during the autumn. So the reconnaissance can be a very good opportunity for us to test the seeds. So reconnaissance made 1 or 2 months before the seed collection will give some indication as to how the seeds are maturing. So the conclusion, if you look at these charts, could be something like stand A, X, and Y carry very light crops, not worth collecting this year perhaps, or maybe collecting for conservation purposes. Although we know that when there is a good crop, also the quality improves, so you may want to consider to delay anyway. Whereas for stands C and Z, here you can say good crops, the seeds probably is mature in 4 weeks. And then of course you carry out a final check before seed collection. Now to the next section on ecological site classification. What is it? When selecting the tree species for a site as recommended in forestry best practices, we need to assess the site conditions for both soil and climate. These will allow us to make informed decision on selecting the species and provenance that is suitable to the site, and for as much as possible also delivers our management objectives. Pest and disease and a continuously changing climate make selecting the right species a challenging task. Each tree species has an optimum range of conditions for growth. Outside of this range, the tree species performance decline. Factors contributing to the health and performance of the trees are the climate, and with climate we mean warmth, wetness, windiness, winter hazards, and unseasonable frosts. And for soil, we mean fertility of the soil, and therefore what is identified in an ecological site classification as soil nutrient regime, or also the availability of water, soil moisture regime, but also the rooting depth is important. So many aspects to consider really. The ecological site classification is an internet, a web-based decision support system to help forest managers and planners to select the tree species that are ecologically suited to a particular site instead of selecting the species and trying to modify the site to suit. The ESC uses a grid reference to provide a model estimate for climate condition. There are 2 primary inputs for climate in the ESC, temperature and moisture. With the temperature and moisture, we can identify the climatic regions. The climate grids are the grids of all the possible combination of the 2 most important climatic factors. And if we match these with the windiness on a scale to 1 to 5, we come across 40 climatic zones. And these climatic zones are used by the ecological site classification to then model suitability of tree species. The ESC uses a yield class as the main measure of performance, and it calculates the species suitability to specific sites, ranked unsuitable to very suitable, as you can see from this chart. For each site factor within a given tree species, there's a different curve. And overlaying all curves of certain species site combination results in a final suitability score. Using the ESC, you can determine the suitability class for each site factor, as well as the limiting site factor for the species. And this is a screenshot of really what the result of the ecological site classification can look like. In the 2 brackets here, you can see one projection, and the second on a baseline climate with default setting, and then a projection made with high emission scenarios. And the species, each row here represents 1 tree species. The species first row are the same. And you can see that the difference with high emission scenario is quite striking. For example, on a high emission scenario, we got the downy birch becomes completely unsuitable for this given landscape, whereas beech is almost unsuitable. And what really drives the suitability of the site is the limiting factor, which is the lowest ranked factor. In this case, is moisture deficit for both downy birch and beech. So the ESC provide detailed analysis for all commercial timber species in the UK, and climate change will affect site condition in the future for a given tree species. For a given site, the ESC returns a projection of suitability of tree species in the future to 2050 or 2080 and under different emission scenarios. Right. So the ecological site classification is a support system. And I just want to finish this section by saying it does not provide you with a definite answer for your site, but rather it helps you find your answer. Ultimately, it is you as a landowner or land agent that makes decision on the tree species selection. Just checking how I'm doing with time. I don't know how much time I've got left, but hopefully enough.
You've got, we started a couple of minutes late, Mauro, so if you want to run over by a few minutes, that's okay.
Right. Okay, thank you. So we move on now to the last section, which is tree establishment. So element of tree establishment and factor influencing transplant survival. This presentation aims to show the basic factor and procedure critical to tree establishment, which can help to achieve significant reduction in transplant losses. We start with ecophysiology, which is the genetic potential of trees to establish in a given environment and species characteristic which may reduce the impact of a particular stress. And then we'll move on to plant quality, planting and post-planting practices, and also the rooting environment. So you may not be completely aware of this, but it's not unusual to find mortality of about 30% by year one from planting. And until some decades ago, it wasn't unusual to find up to 50%. So this is a huge loss in seed diversity, but also in the economy of our business, or and also in labor as well. There's we will not cover the stress factor in details, but there's different abiotic stress factors involved. This is just to raise awareness of the many abiotic stresses variable that undergo newly planted trees. And this is without considering pests and diseases, which may or not be a consequence of the abiotic stresses. Some abiotic stresses are typical of the anthropic environment, such as pollutants, heavy metal, etc., while others are more related to the suitability of the planting location, and therefore factors such as waterlogging or the length of the growing season and drought may come into play as well. But climate is an important factor in tree performance, and a poor climatic fit can affect the let's say performance of our trees. So solar radiations, temperature at the growing season affect the tree species performance, but also microclimate and the altered bodies is altered by bodies of water, as well as the slope and azimuth determine the suitability of a tree species to that given landscape. Tree tolerance to transplanting varies between genera. There are transplant tolerant trees such as poplar, willow, alder, and others such as beech and walnut or horse chestnut that are more transplant sensitive. So you need to be a little bit more careful depending on the species you plant. Although variation between species will exist, at planting, it is recommended to keep at least 6 lateral roots when planting, as lower number of lateral roots are associated with a decrease in survival rates. Trees that possess physiological adaptations such as waterlogging and drought resistance should be considered at planting as well. Also, there has to be an awareness that trees planted early in the dormant season, such as in November or December, tend to survive and have a higher survival rate than trees planted later in the growing season, although some species do prefer spring planting. And concentration of carbohydrate reserves within the roots is important for survival after transplanting. Prolonged cold storage also deplete the reserves of energy in a plant. Nursery production practices directly influence establishment. Transplant success is critically linked to adequate root area for resource acquisition, and it is known that up to 98% of the root system may be left at the nursery. High density spacing between plants can impact tree establishment because it diminishes the stem taper and increase the amount of shade. These affect the photosynthesis and, like we mentioned before, the carbon storage, carbon availability, and growth. Seedlings that are grown in containers for too long can also develop circling roots. These are the fact that then can persist, and then they can affect the translocation of materials and also bring in some instability issues as well. So using pot design which facilitates the pruning is a good recommendation. For transport of trees from the nursery to the planting site, it's important to keep our plants in covered vehicles and make sure they are always moisture. Water the trees prior to shipping, and ideally check the moisture after arrival, because exposed root can desiccate very rapidly. Planting, assess the roots or the root ball for protection defect. Roots which circle over 1/3 of the root ball should be removed. The upper roots must not be more than a few centimeters below the soil surface. The stem flare must be clearly visible. Prepare the planting site. An area of 2 to 3 times the diameter of the root ball should be decompacted, and the planting hole itself should not be deeper than the existing root ball or the root stem in transition. Plant the tree so that the root ball or root stem transition is level with the existing host soil. It has been shown in research that planting trees 5 to 8 centimeters below the root ball causes up to 50% death rates in several species. Add backfill gradually, ensuring the trees is held upright, and be careful not to cause excessive compaction. And the soil removed from the hole makes the best backfill. Water the root ball and the planting area immediately after planting. It is critically important to ensure that the roots are not allowed to desiccate at any stage during the handling or planting, because it causes irreversible damage to the root system. And the support should allow the stem and canopy movement so that the reaction wood develops, the stem taper, and the root growth is stimulated. Support system which restricts the canopy stem movement also restrict these processes from occurring. So the best management practices recommend the support as low as possible. Also, the tree ties should spread the load of the support on the stem with a wide band, usually hessian or rubber, which facilitate the radial expansion of the stem and prevent bark abrasion as well. And I think with this one, I am going to bluntly conclude my presentation. That's everything, and I welcome any question either now or later. Thank you. Stop sharing.
Thank you, Mauro. If anyone has got any questions, we can spend a couple of minutes on those. Otherwise, we can move on to Nathaniel. I've shared the ecological site classification link to on the FR website in the chat. So if anybody wants to have a little look at that, then the link's there and available. Okay, I can see no hands or no questions. So Nathaniel, if you're good to go, do you want to set up your screen share, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Tamara.
Well, Nathaniel?
Yep. Can you hear see that fine?
Yeah, all good. Thank you.
Great. Just need to get these screens out of the way. Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Nathaniel Callahan. I'm the Plant Health Operational Support Officer for Yorkshire and the North East, and I work alongside Mauro, as Becky says, to conduct inland surveys and tree health inspections. So likely if you've reported something through mechanisms such as tree alert or any other pathways, it will be me and Mauro potentially ending up on site inspecting what you've reported. So today I'm going to deliver 2 presentations. The first one's going to be on common pests and diseases in Yorkshire and the North East. And I'm going to also present on how you can report trees with signs and symptoms of ill health through Tree Alert. I'm also happy to take questions at the end of each slide or at the end of the presentation, but if someone could please tell me any questions that come in the chat, that would be great. So I'd like to begin by asking if anyone can identify any signs or symptoms of ill health in trees. So I'm going to open the floor and say there's a pretty obvious one on the photograph here, or if you pop some in the chat. Yep, stem bleeding. There's no stupid answers to this question. Browning of crown, yeah. Dancing trees, yeah. Crown dieback, that's a big one, yeah. And yeah, definitely necrosis of the bark. Yeah, these are all they're all good symptoms of signs and symptoms of pests and diseases. Cankers, yeah, that's a big one. I'll go from there, if that's okay. Fruiting bodies, yeah, fungal fruiting bodies, that's a big one as well. So this photograph is taken by one of our colleagues, and it's quite a powerful example of sign and symptom of tree pest and disease. As you can see, these are about 4 Lawson cypress lined up together. The ones on the left are asymptomatic, so don't show any signs necessarily of pest and disease that we can see from this photograph. However, the Lawson cypress on the right there, which is completely died, was infected with a disease called Phytophthora lateralis, which is an aggressive disease of Lawson cypress, which few cypress can actually recover from. So I'm going to run through now some major signs and symptoms of ill health in trees. So on image 1 here, we can see resin on a branch which has been released. This resin's been released as a stress reaction. This can be a result of both living or non-living stresses to the tree, so biotic or abiotic factors. For example, that could be a result of a bacterial infection, or it could be a result of mechanical damage. The second image there shows wilting and death of foliage on a rhododendron. This can occur again as a result of both abiotic or biotic stresses to the tree or the plant in this circumstance. Abiotic commonly is a common symptom of drought. Though the wilting of the foliage is a very common symptom of pests and diseases also. In this circumstance, it was a Phytophthora species. Image number 3, as mentioned in the chat again, are fungal fruiting bodies. Fungal fruiting bodies are present as part of a reproductive stage of the fungal life cycle. These structures release spores, which can then be dispersed onto other hosts. Image number 4 is discoloration of foliage, also known as chlorosis. Again, this can be both caused by abiotic and biotic factors, but again, this is a common symptom of pest and disease, one we're commonly looking out for. Number 5 is lesions. Lesions are more commonly attributed to the presence of pests and disease. However, they can be caused by mechanical damage to trees. They also have the capacity to girdle the tree and prevent nutrient and water movement by sort of girdling the xylem and phloem. if it's caused by a pest or disease. And that's what ash dieback does. And that image there is a lesion caused by ash dieback, Hymenocystis fraxineus. And number 6 is crown reduction and crown dieback. That is a really iconic sort of symptom of pests and disease, especially ash dieback. So number 7, trees can be put on excessive epicormic growth as a stress reaction to pests and disease. However, some tree species naturally have high volumes of epicormic growth, such as beech. Image number 8, beetle exit holes. As the name suggests, the holes that the bark beetles, for example, create to exit the underneath of the bark when they've hibernated over winter. 9 is the actual beetles. However, we don't necessarily expect everyone to have a common entomology sort of mindset. However, if you do, bark beetles such as this one, which is Ips typographus, which is spruce bark beetle, can cause significant damage to trees when populations are found in large quantities, or they can come in as a secondary pathogen and kill a tree that's already been infected with another disease or pest. Number 10, leaf miners are insects which in the larval stage of their life cycles live in and eat the leaf tissues of plants, and these are mostly moths, sawflies, and flies. And number 11, galls are abnormal growths found on the buds, leaves, and petioles of trees. In the larval stage of the life cycle of gall wasps, larvae secrete chemicals which can cause the reorganization of the tree's normal growth processes. And the galls are the tissue created by the plant larvae, by the plant surrounding the larvae. So I'm going to move on now to specific pests and diseases which are quite prevalent in our area. So the first one I'm going to touch on is Phytophthora ramorum. It's also known as ramorum disease of larch. It's a fungus-like organism which causes extensive damage and death to over 150 species of plants. This makes it a significant problem for our natural environment and wider plant-based industries, and it's why we require swift action to be taken in the case of a Phytophthora ramorum infection. It's what's known as a water mold fungi. Well, a water mold. It's not actually a fungus. It is more closely related to a bacteria, and it's particularly aggressive and prevalent in wetter areas regarding spread. It's prevalent on the west coast of Great Britain, but cases have been found in the Yorkshire North East area. The map on the right-hand side of the presentation there, the red dots are cases that have been found positive of Phytophthora ramorum. And you can see, if you look closely in the Yorkshire Dales, there are quite a few cases that have been found, and moving over towards Lancaster. But we've also found it in the North York Moors and West Yorkshire, Sheffield, sort of Barnsley area. But the vast majority of it is situated in the west coast of England, southwest and northwest, due to the climate there being a bit more suited for it. So the disease infects the tree and impairs the vascular system, the water and nutrient transport system throughout the tree by blocking the xylem, which is blocking the sort of water intake and movement around the tree. Species affected include larch species, sweet chestnut, rhododendron, beech, and southern beech. Bilberries and heather can also be affected, though wild heather has a low susceptibility to the disease. These are ecologically important plants, and the bilberry is closely related to the blueberry. So therefore, there's a potential for that crossover and causing even more significant economic damage. And it occasionally affects certain oak species such as turkey oak, red oak, and holm oak. In America, this disease is also known as sudden oak death due to it having a widespread impact on the western coast of North America and their native oak species. Signs and symptoms of Phytophthora ramorum include dieback of the canopy. If you can see image 1, which is at the bottom left there, it is you can see that there's large trees surrounding with foliage on. However, the tree in the center has barely any foliage on, if any foliage. Discoloration and wilting of foliage. Image number 2 there is a larch tree which has which is obvious discoloration of the foliage, and image number 4 is the image that we saw earlier of the rhododendron, which was wilting. Image number 3 is epicormic growth. It can be produced as a stress reaction to the disease. And image number 5 again is resin bleeds. That's a resin bleed on a larch branch. However, there is also the potential of retention of dead foliage during winter on larch and sweet chestnut, which may suggest that the tree is infected with some sort of pathogen, as it's inhibited its natural processes of shedding the foliage. So, Phytophthora ramorum, what's the spread and impact on the landscape? So it's spread through spores, even though it isn't a fungus, it does spread through spores. Dispersed through wind and water. And it can also be spread via footwear, tools and equipment, bicycles and vehicle wheels, and also the movement of timber. This image here is quite a pungent sort of reminder of the impact on the environment. This is actually during the growing season. It just happens to be just a very sort of extensive infection of Phytophthora. As you can see, there's a lot of dead sort of or discoloring foliage there. And larches larches it's a large component of commercial forests in the country, and in 2016 it was around 110,000 hectares. This is obviously a drop now as a result of Phytophthora and the landowners taking action to fell it before it's their larch is infected, and also our team catching it and issuing statutory plant health notices. Phytophthora alnii is the next disease we'll discuss. It's a Phytophthora disease of alder. It's a fungus-like organism which has a great impact on alders and consequently riparian zones. It's widespread across Great Britain and Europe, prevalent in southeast England and the Welsh borders. It causes root and collar rot, leading to the mortality of the tree. Species affected include common alder, grey alder, Italian alder, and green alder. It's important, especially important as well, since alder is a source of nitrogen for soils, and there is sort of little that has been suggested to take the place of alder in terms of being nitrogen fixing and also having that role in the riparian zones. If the alder populations are decimated by such a disease. So signs and symptoms include bleeding at the base of the tree, visible as rusty/tarry spots, as you can see at the top right image. You can see them sort of rusty and tarry spots, including some of the epicormic growth on there, which is almost a bright red colour, a browny bright red colour, which is another symptom of stress. Thin and sparse crowns, small yellow and sparse foliage in summer. The bottom image there is not the best quality, however, it does show an alder with yellowed foliage. Heavy cone production, dieback and death of twigs and branches in the crown, and epicormic growth. So how's this disease spread? It's spread through both water and wind dispersal. It's a disease from the same genus as Phytophthora ramorum. And it can be spread again via footwear, tools, equipment, so through human pathways. Ash dieback, so Hymenoscyphus fraxineus. I'm sure everyone's sort of heard of this. It's also known as Cholera or Cholera ash dieback. It's a highly destructive fungal disease of ash which has decimated our native ash population. It's prevalent across the UK. The map on the right is an image, is a map showing 10-kilometre grid squares which have had ash dieback successfully reported in it. And as you can see, it covers most of the UK, and some of them grid squares that aren't filled in, they will definitely have some in, especially in sort of England. It's just that they haven't been reported as of yet through a tree alert. Younger ash are less tolerant than mature ash to ash dieback. Impacts and blocks the tree's supply of water and nutrients. So species affected include common ash, narrow-leaved ash, and scientists believe all 60 ash species are susceptible to ash dieback with varying degrees of resistance. Ash dieback comes from Eastern Asia, so native Chinese ash are more resistant to the disease than our European ash species. Signs and symptoms of ash dieback include blackening and wilting of shoots and foliage, diamond-shaped lesions on the bark where the branches join the trunk, which you can see in there. You can see them 2 points in image 1 and 2. Very small white fungal fruiting bodies, which is image number 3 in the middle and the right there. They're only very tiny. Dieback of foliage and branches in the crown. It's also worth noting the disease of ash, depending on the stage of infection, can be particularly dangerous to work and be around due to the death of branches and rotting in the heartwood of the stems, which is caused by the fungus. So, spread and impact on the landscape. Spread through wind dispersal of spores up to tens of miles. Spread long distances through movement of infected plants. And again, can be spread through human pathways. So the next disease, the final disease I'm going to discuss is Heterobasidion annosum, conifer root and butt rot. It's a fungal disease of many species of conifer. It's prevalent in mainland Europe, but present in the UK in a lesser severity. It has caused hundreds of millions of euros worth of damage to the commercial timber crops in Scandinavia by causing rots, root rots, and also butt rot and stem rot. And again, reinforcing that point, has the potential to cause serious economic losses in the forestry industry in this country. And species affected include spruce, Douglas fir, western red cedar, true firs, larch, hemlocks, and pines. So the vast majority of conifer species. Signs and symptoms of Heterobasidion include well, it's hard to identify unless the presence of a fungal fruiting body is present. But it's a bracket fungi. So the bracket fungal fruiting bodies with white underside and light to dark upper brown side are the most it's the only real way of determining, other than molecular or taking a sample and sending it to a lab. And it causes the lower stem to decay. So that's another sign and symptom. It's a sign that it has a butt rot. The spread of Heterobasidion is like as follows. So originally the spores fall on freshly cut stumps. They then germinate and form infected hyphae, which is part of the mycelium. Mycelium being almost like a root sort of system for the fungi. It invades the stump and root system and spreads to other touching root systems. You can see this in the diagram below. And it's worth noting that all of the pathogens I've discussed thus far can be spread by human activity, which signifies the importance of good biosecurity, good personal biosecurity. Just a very quick one on abiotic pathogens. So abiotic pathogens can cause the same signs and symptoms as living notifiable pests and diseases. It's very important to take context into consideration. You're likely to see symptoms such as dieback and dead foliage in conditions of drought, as you are with a disease such as dieback. Here are a list of abiotic factors, which include drought, flooding, wind, fire, lightning, compaction, and mechanical damage. A tree may have been windblown rather than the potential of it being caused by a root rot, for example, or resin bleeds may have been caused by mechanical damage rather than a bacterial or a fungal infection. And so my final slide is about the potential future pests and diseases for our area. So the first one is Ips typographus, which is the larger 8-toothed European spruce bark beetle. It's a destructive pest of spruce, especially Norway spruce. It's found in southeast England currently. Secondary pest, however, it can cause extensive damage to trees in mass infestations and attacks. It's one we need to keep an eye out for to protect our commercial spruce plantations. Phytophthora pluvialis, another species of Phytophthora that affects pine, western hemlock, tan oak, and Douglas fir. Cryphonectria parasitica, sweet chestnut blight. So it affects sweet chestnut. Infections are usually fatal to our sweet chestnut, and it's almost wiped out the sweet chestnut population in North America. Xylella fastidiosa, potential to significantly damage a wide range of plants grown in the UK and would have extensive consequences for biodiversity. Elm, plane, English oak, and maple, including sycamores, are all potential hosts of that particular disease. And oriental chestnut gall wasp, which is Dryocosmus coryphalis. As discussed during the gall section, wasps lay eggs in the tree's growth buds. The larvae then hatch from the eggs and overwinter in there. In spring, larval activity and development in the buds continues, causing the formation of galls in early summer due to chemicals released by the larvae, which changes the chemical composition of the plant tissue. It's a pathogen that's not likely to kill the host by itself, but creates a higher chance of the tree being killed by a secondary pathogen, such as honey fungus or any of the other pests and diseases we've discussed in this presentation. So that's the end of that presentation. I'm aware that I've ran over by a few minutes. So if there's any questions, I've got another presentation to do. If I can answer them after that, that would be great. Thank you. So can you see this, Mauro?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you.
You're in a slide view.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so following on from that presentation, how do we report pests and diseases in the UK? Well, in Great Britain, more precisely. And that's through a system called Tree Alert, which is run by Forestry Research. And this is a way that me and Mauro find out from yourselves if there's any symptomatic trees in the area, and we will come out depending on the level of severity of the symptoms, etc. So what is Tree Alert? Tree Alert's a primary method that all members of the public can use to report trees which are symptomatic of disease. Examples of symptoms include dieback of branches and foliage, resinous bleeds on stems and branches, exit holes of beetles from the bark, lesions, discoloration and death of foliage.
Sorry to interrupt, Nathaniel. Just so you know, I think we can still see just the slide view of your previous presentation, but we can't see the Tree Alert presentation, if that makes sense.
All right, that makes sense. I'll do that now. Thank you.
No worries.
All right, Nathaniel, I thought it was what you wanted.
No problem. How's
There we go. Yes.
Yeah, you are now in slide view. If you put in presenter view.
yeah, 2 seconds. Sorry about this, the bar at the top's in the way. There we go.
Yeah, that works. Thanks.
Great. Okay, so starting again, basically. So again, Tree Alert is the primary method that all members of the public can use to report trees which are symptomatic of disease, which include symptoms which we've discussed in the previous presentation. It was set up by Forest Research to gather data on the health of the country's trees and woodlands. This is becoming more important due to climate change and the potential of a wider variety of exotic pests and diseases entering the country. It's the preferred way for members of the public and industry colleagues to report tree pests and diseases in Great Britain. And Tree Check is a separate system which is used in Northern Ireland, which is run by DERA, which is the Department of Agriculture, the Environment and Rural Affairs in Northern Ireland. So how does it work? Initially, you'll have 3 options to choose from once on the Tree Alert homepage. These include submitting a general report of a problem affecting tree health, submitting a report of a specific tree pest or disease, and requesting a diagnosis of a tree pest or disease if you own or manage trees. However, that option may be chargeable. The most appropriate option for most people is the general report option, which I'll focus on for the rest of the slides. However, if you're aware of specific pests and disease, for example, ash dieback, you may use the second option to report it. The diagnosis, if you own or manage trees, may be subject to a flat rate charge for the initial investigation from the Forest Research Tree Health Diagnostic and Advisory Service. This service may also incur additional charges if processes such as culturing from specimens and molecular identification are required. However, for them process to go ahead, they would require permission from the landowner. And this also includes nurseries and Christmas tree plantations. However, there is no charge for this service if the inquiry concerns a regulated pest or disease, such as Phytophthora ramorum. Focusing on submitting a general report, there are a number of fields which require your information to be entered in order to submit a report, including your name and email address. If you're a landowner or know the landowner or an agent of the landowner, it is important that we know this information so that we can contact them or you to arrange access, etc., so we can take samples. So you also have the option to not be contacted further after submitting a report. This, however, comes with a caveat that we may need to contact you regarding more information or the potential of taking it further if you are a landowner or agent. Other important information required is the date of discovery, type of location, for example, hedgerow, woodland and parkland, the actual location, which is preferably a 10-figure grid reference and postcode, and tree species affected. Details that are helpful to know include your level of knowledge and experience regarding trees and the natural environment, if you're part of an organisation or group, or if you're represented by one, and if you are submitting the report in response to specific projects or campaigns, such as observatory or general tree health surveys. So photographs are very important in submitting a report so that inspectors, entomologists and pathologists can get an idea of what's happening on the trees before visiting the site and collecting samples, and so that the tree or trees on site can be easily identified once we are on site. Take good quality photos in the best possible natural lighting. Avoid taking blurry photos and take several photos, including the entire tree in relation to its surroundings, the symptoms in relation to their location on the tree, and the symptom or symptoms up close. These are photographs of a holly with quite prevalent dieback of the foliage and on the main stem. So you can see on these two photographs that it's quite obvious and prevalent. And on this photograph, you can see on the main stem where the bark has died and is meeting with living tissue, which suggests that there's a struggle going on between the holly and a pathogen rather than an abiotic factor such as drought or waterlogging, since the tree is actually fighting against something rather than just sort of withering away from itself. The system will also ask for the approximate diameter of the tree, or if there's more than one stem, meaning multiple diameters. The diameter measurement is taken as per this picture through the center of the stem. And equipment which can make this easier includes DBH tape and calipers. So the importance of reporting tree health problems through Tree Alert includes assisting in preventing or limiting the spread of pests and diseases. It allows us to monitor the spread of pests and diseases more accurately, and it contributes to ongoing scientific research through the collection of samples and geographical data. And it can also benefit woodland owners and managers, firstly by safeguarding their environment through action to limit the spread and impact of pathogens, as infections and infestations may result in a potential loss of habitat. And also, if you have a commercial timber crop, it can also help you financially. It protects the value of timber such as larch through taking action to limit the volume infected rather than allowing more of it to be devalued through a larger infection. With Phytophthora ramorum, when you when you get a SPHN, a statutory plant health notice on larch, it devalues the timber to an extent. However, this can be supported through grants, tree health grants, which is something that your local woodland officer will know more about. So Tree Alert has just been updated. I'd recommend, if you're unfamiliar with the system, checking it out online. It's quite a straightforward system. If you require any more information regarding Tree Alert or any of the pests and diseases that I've discussed, then please visit Forest Research's website. Or if you would like a bit more sort of text in the explanations regarding it, then visit Observatory, which have field guides to help you identify pests and diseases on trees. Other than that, that's me. Thanks for that. I think I'll pass it back over to you, Becky.
Thank you, Nathaniel, and thank you for your two presentations. I hope everyone found them really useful. Maro's giving you a round of applause. We are a little bit over, but that's my fault because I hijacked the beginning of the meeting doing the intro, which wasn't originally planned. So let me just check. I can see a message that's popped up. Carol, okay, we'll take a question now if that's okay. If you want to just stay around, Maro, Nathaniel, there's one question from Carol. Are there many non-regulatory pests and diseases, and does FC have advice and details about these, and do you want them reporting?
Well, for example, Maro can correct me if I'm slightly mistaken, but ash dieback isn't actually a notifiable pest or disease anymore. However, Forest Research does want to know about it in any of the 10-kilometre grid squares where it hasn't been recorded. So you can report that through Tree Alert, and you can see the 10-kilometre grid squares which haven't had anything recorded on the FERA's website. FERA and Forest Research have created a Kalara map. However, to be fair, it would be good if everyone got into the mindset of reporting general ill health, because it could be something new. It could be it could have come from Europe or something, and you might have found the first sample of that disease in the country. It's better to over-report than under-report, is what I would say.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Sorry, Mara.
Thanks, Nathaniel. I just wanted to add in the thorough answer. I think if you go on the Forest Research website or on the gov.uk Forestry Commission website, that there will be a list of pests and diseases, and when you open each of these links, it should give you on the headings either or not it's notifiable as well. So that could be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Maro. And also a new feature of the Tree Alert, the new Tree Alert website, is for reporting healthy trees, because we do want to know about those as much as we want to know about unhealthy trees. So, and I've got a slide on Observatory in my presentation after the break. And we do ask Observatory volunteers to report on some non-notifiable pests and diseases as well, because we think it's quite important that people can actually find stuff that they're looking for as well. Otherwise you get a little bit disheartened. Obviously we don't want to be finding the nasties, but when you are looking, it is nice to find. So things, for example, like horse chestnut leaf miner, we do ask them to report. Okay, so we are about 15 minutes behind time. So would anybody object to shortening the break by 5 minutes and just having a 10-minute comfort break? And we'll reconvene at 20 to 4, and that should pretty much get us back on track for a 4:30 finish. If that's okay with everybody. I've got a couple of thumbs up. So yeah, so if I can ask you to be back for 20 to 4, please. Thank you. It could be from anything from kind of cleaning. It's telling me recording's in progress. Anything from cleaning your boots at the end of the day through to kind of writing legislation and policy. So this is the overarching definition of biosecurity, and I want to keep that in your mind throughout this presentation, and particularly when we move into the group exercise a little later on. Now, here in the UK, we have what we call the biosecurity continuum, and this focuses on kind of three main areas. So the work that we do pre-border, so thinking about legislation and policy, strategies and plans, research and intelligence. It very much relies on international collaboration, all to try and reduce the risk and the likelihood of biosecurity threats, so pests, pathogens, invasive non-native species arriving here in the UK. There's a lot of information sharing on these pathways and threats, and we use it as a bit of an advance warning of threats as well. So we talk to each other, basically. There's then the work that happens at the border itself. And you may remember from my slides at the beginning of this session, where I talked about border control and the imports and exports. So basically what we're doing here is we're checking to reduce the risk of biosecurity threats crossing the borders and entering into the UK, and the opposite way as well. And we feed back kind of data and intelligence all to form our risk assessments. We've then got post-border, and here on this triangle that you can see, this covers the inland surveillance, but also that bottom kind of slither of the triangle, the everyday biosecurity. And that takes up the biggest portion here, because that's where we can all get involved and where we can really make a difference. So post-border, and again, going back to my slides at the beginning of the session, where I was talking about the aerial surveillance that we carry out, citizen science, the trapping, the surveying, it's that early detection of biosecurity threats. And anybody in the room here can get involved with this. And it is going to take, and hopefully we're slowly getting there, but it is a bit of a cultural change. So that's a very, very quick overview in one slide about how the UK deal with biosecurity. So why is it important? Why do we bother? So our natural environment and resources, so we're including livestock and crops here, are under an increasing threat, and we'll see why in a couple of slides time, from organisms that have been introduced to the UK from all over the world. And as I mentioned, we call these biosecurity threats, and they include pests, diseases, parasites, and invasive non-natives. And I've got a handy little slide here, and this is where I want you to unmute, if you will, turn your cameras on, whatever you feel comfortable doing. And I'd just like a bit of an idea of if we're familiar with any of these, or if there's any biosecurity threats that you can tell me about that maybe aren't on here. But let's start with this slide. So top left, who can tell me what we're looking at? I can't see any cameras or anything, so I'm doing this blind. So go on, whoever was going to say something, then go for it.
Asian hornet.
Thank you. Yes, Asian hornet, a predator of honeybees. What we're looking at, middle top.
Ash dieback.
Ash dieback, perfect. I would have taken dead tree, sick tree, unhappy tree, but ash dieback is spot on. A catastrophic fungus of our UK native ash. Now I want at least 10 people to talk over each other for this one. Top right.
A really cute fluffy squirrel.
Well done, yes, grey squirrel. So we know it causes significant damage to our forest trees, but it also acts as a squirrel pox vector for our native reds. Oh, I'm giving the game away. Bottom left, not a very nice sight. Anyone?
Foot and mouth.
Yeah, foot and mouth disease. So a highly infectious virus of livestock and deer. Now, middle bottom might be a bit tricky for most of you. You never know. I've had experts on calls and I know exactly what this is. And then they go on for 10 minutes reeling out everything. I'm thinking, oh dear, I hope I've got it right. I'll tell you, this is the Chinese mitten crab, and it causes bank erosion and is a parasite vector. And then the bottom right, I appreciate the photos are probably not the clearest, but bottom right, any ideas?
Japanese knotweed?
No.
Is it New Zealand pygmyweed?
Nearly floating pennywort. So an aggressively competitive plant, and you can just about make out from that very, very small rubbish image that there is just this carpet of it clogging up the waterways there. We'll return back to these in a minute, because I'd be interested to see if you know how they arrived and whether it was deliberate or accidental. But firstly, I just want to have a little look at how biosecurity threats are spread. So obviously there's natural routes. They're designed to reproduce, they're designed to spread. That's how they survive. And there's a few ways in which pests and diseases spread naturally. So we've got spread through vector. So a lot of viruses can be carried, particularly on midges, and they can spread for quite a significant distance. Something that's quite prominent at the moment, avian influenza, so bird flu, which is carried on migratory birds. Through the air, through air currents, we've got ash dieback, where the fungal spores are carried from nearby continental Europe through the air. And also another example is spruce bark beetle, which can make its way over here from massive outbreaks over in Europe, and it's carried on the wind and arrives on our shores. And then finally, water. So natural migration along waterways and potentially carried by currents. So there are natural routes. We then have a little look at human-assisted routes. And does anyone want to shout out a potential human-assisted route of how a pest or disease may arrive in the UK or spread once it's here? Go for it.
Taking a cutting off something.
Yes, so cuttings and moving cuttings around. So you've got two issues there. You've got the cutting itself, and then you've also potentially got contaminated tools. So 2 ticks, brilliant. Any more?
Importing bark mulch.
Yep, importing of mulch or other wood products. Yep, so that's quite a big one. Any more? Oh, sort of heard something then, but it wasn't very clear. Do you want to go again?
Footwear.
Footwear, yes, a perfect one. Yeah. So let's have a little look. So we've got intentional release. So quite often, you know, things are just let go into the wild that are already here or might or shouldn't be here that have been brought over. So that was the case for the grey squirrel. Escape or spread from gardens on farms, for example. We've got the live animal imports, so just moving live animals around. A foot and mouth example there. The movement of live plants for planting. This is quite a significant one. And typically, the bigger the plant, the bigger the risk. We've got the movement of foodstuff and flowers, and there's a cap on how many bunches of flowers we're allowed to bring into the country. Plant material, just in general. Soil and growing media. Timber and other wood products. Firewood, and we have a firewood notification scheme that we lead within the FC. We've got wood packaging material, so another big one for us. Contaminated tools, machinery, kit and clothing, etc. We've mentioned that one. Hitchhikers, and that's not the pest or disease stood at the side of the road with the thumb in the air. That's, for example, what have we got? Horse chestnut leaf miner, we think came over potential on military vehicles. So just, you know, getting caught up on something and being brought over here accidentally. Ballast water, we'll have a little look at that in a second. Irrigation water, marine debris, and the list goes on, but we will stop there. But I think this slide kind of clearly demonstrates that human-assisted routes can spread biosecurity threats much further and faster than the natural pathways. So if we just quickly return back to the slide that we looked at a couple of slides ago, and I'd be interested to know if you know how these biosecurity threats were introduced. And I'm happy just to hear whether it was accidental or whether it was deliberate. So if we look at the Asian hornet, do we think it was accidental or deliberate? Should I give this one away? Accidentally released. So it's thought that hibernating queens were in soil associated with plants, also in foodstuff, flowers and in freight containers. So they were accidentally imported as hibernating queens. Ash dieback, accidental or deliberate? Probably a bit of an easy one, that one. So this was accidental. So, well, in a way, infected plants were brought over into Europe and then into the UK, but also we know that it arrived here on spores carried in the air. Grey squirrel, accidental or deliberate? Come on, someone shout out.
Deliberate.
Deliberate.
Yeah, very much deliberate. So this one was intentionally released into England, Wales and Republic of Ireland on multiple occasions because it's dead cute, right?
Yep.
Hand, foot and mouth. Hand, foot and mouth. Sorry, I keep saying that because my little one's had it that much. I've just got it ingrained in my brain. Foot and mouth disease, very different. So this was improper feed practices which passed the virus to live animals, enabling it to spread then through livestock transport. The Chinese mitten crab, this is a very interesting one. So this was actually expelled with ballast water from container ships. And for anybody that's a bit sad like me, there's some fantastic reading that can be done on the Ballast Water Management Convention, which entered into force in 2017, because it was realised that this was a significant risk and that something did need to be done. And then floating pennywort, that was intentionally released from gardens. So a kind of a case of, you know, chucking it over the garden fence kind of thing. So it shows you how easily these things can arrive and then how they're spread further. So looking at the impacts that they cause, and I'm not going to spend much time on this because I'd really like to get going with the activity. But if we look at ash dieback, for example, which we've mentioned a couple of times already today, we know that the total economic cost of ash dieback in Britain is estimated to be around 14.8 billion. Now that cost is estimated over 100 years, which is quite hard to predict, but that's what they've come up with. But more than half of that total, so around 7.6 billion, is expected to occur within the next 10 years, so probably the next 8 years now, based on when this was calculated. And that's in cleanup costs mostly. This middle beastie is the Asian longhorn beetle, a fantastic story, which if we get invited back to lead a pest and disease walk, or we'd like to come and meet you in person sometime, we'll make sure that we include the case study on the Asian longhorn beetle. But this little fella did find its way over to the UK. We did have an outbreak down in Kent. And the cost to survey and eradicate it, which we have been successful in doing so, it cost us in the region of around 1.9 million. So a significant amount of money. And that came in wood packaging material on stone, the material protecting stone that was imported from China. And then finally, collectively, invasive non-native species, the problems that they cause currently cost the UK on average about 1.9 billion every year. So a significant amount of money. And we do know that it is a growing problem. We've definitely seen an increase in globalization, so trade and travel over the past 40 years. There's more and more products arriving on the shores than ever before. And just a couple of examples, the UK import of live plants has increased by about 70% since 1999. And a study that was done in 2019, I'm sure there's been more recent studies, but I haven't been able to pull any figures from them. But a study that was done in 2019 averaged the import of live trees and plants to be about 97 million. So a pretty decent industry. So when people say to us, well, why can't you just stop the import of all plants to stop pests and diseases? It's not that easy. But of course, we do try to use as much homegrown stock as possible. We've got things like the Plant Healthy accreditation scheme, the Ready to Plant assessment, which you may or may not be familiar with, but there are management and measures in place to try and reduce this risk. Climate change is another one. It's got a big role to play, and it will continue to play an even bigger role over the next few decades. Hotter temperatures and changing weather patterns, as we can see on here, result in stressed trees, and a stressed tree is more vulnerable to pest and disease attack. It also increases the probability of certain pests and diseases establishing because their natural range is increased. We get hit in the south and the southeast quite heavy, but as we see temperatures changing, we're going to see those pests and diseases make their way further north, as is the case for certain ones that we're dealing with at the moment. So that's a very quick, for me anyway, overview of biosecurity. What is it and why it's important? Now, let me just do a time check. I think it's going to work out perfect. So it's nearly 4 o'clock. So we're due to finish at past. So we are going to move into quiz time now. So we're going to put you all into breakout rooms. Don't worry, you won't be on your own. You will have a facilitator with you. And I'm just trying to get you back. I've lost you all. And we're going to do a little bit of a biosecurity quiz, and then we'll all come back into the main room and we'll look through the answers, and I'll present a few more slides to kind of give you the correct answers there. So Mike, are we okay? If I stop sharing, I think that might be the best thing. There we go. Right, it's nice to be back in this room. Even though I can't see any of you, just seeing the names is a bit more reassuring than just the presentation. Green. Right, I hope you all enjoyed the breakout activities. We ran out of time, but that was my fault because I was chatting away. So please let me know. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, right. Well, I'm gonna rush through not rush through, but we've got 15 minutes and we need to make sure that we finish on time. So we'll whistle through these. So facilitators, if you want to kind of feedback, you can, but we'll keep it fairly brief. Otherwise, I do think we're going to run out of time. But there was a series of questions. We had some really good conversation in our group. And I promised them that I'd give them the answers now, which is what I'm going to do. I don't know how many of you managed not to give the game away for the facilitators out there. But the first question was, what does personal biosecurity mean to you? And within our group, we had a conversation around kind of cleaning boots and making sure that your clothing that belongs to you is cleaned. We were talking about the different roles that each of them had within the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust and where personal biosecurity kind of came into play there. Is that a similar kind of conversation that we were having in the other breakout rooms? Did we come up with anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, I can go if you want, Becky. And I've seen from my group, they were thinking already into items, and therefore they were very focused on footwear. And then they started thinking about tools and thinking also about the work, your work, and being involved in an activity. So they thought about work and transport as well. So the transport in the way of moving material infected material from one place to another.
Fantastic. Right, I'm going to start with Maro because I haven't got time to go through all the rooms, but if the facilitators want to kind of add up some points, then please do. So when we talk about personal biosecurity, we're basically talking about anything that is belonging to or affecting a particular person rather than anyone else. So for example, footwear, which we've mentioned, waterproofs, protective clothing, your vehicle, so transportation, like I say, anything belonging to you. So it might be the tools that you're using. One thing that normally gets forgotten about is your work. So it's the work that you're carrying out. And that also includes the planning of. So it may be that you're going to visit a couple of sites in a day, or it may be the weekend and you're going for a dog walk in the morning, then you're going for a lovely walk round RHS Harlow car, and then you're going to do another dog walk in the evening. Does that come with increased risk? Do you need to think about planning site visit order if you're visiting multiple sites for work? Things like that. So an element of planning. And there are certain things that we can do to ensure that all of that, the above that I've just managed there is a certain way to ensure that all of the things that I've just mentioned are managed in a biosecure way. And one example we have here is this scenario that we went through about seed collecting. So you've arrived at a seed collection site and need to decide where to park. Do you park on a muddy bank, a gravel farm track, or a grassy verge? Emma, what did your breakout room come up with for this one, please?
My team were unanimous and we all agreed on gravel farm track, option B.
Fantastic. And was there any discussion around why they thought that?
I reckon they said it was because it's a more hard standing area.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So this is just some examples. We did a photo shoot a few years ago. If there is an option to park on hard standing, take it. But I do appreciate that it's not always the case. Guaranteed you will park, you will pull up, and the only place to park is in a very, very knee-deep muddy puddle. So not only is your car getting dirty, but you're getting dirty as well. But this again comes back to the planning. So if you can have a quick look on Google Earth, or you might be speaking to a landowner, or whatever it is you're doing, just consider it, have it in the back of your mind before you go and park up. If it means a slightly longer walk, which doesn't result in the car getting dirty, then it may take a bit more time on site, but it's less time back at home or at the car wash cleaning your vehicle. And if you do need to get the vehicles really dirty, then consider using an off-site vehicle wash regularly. And here's just a couple more examples, and there is the ideal, which I appreciate doesn't always come up. Right, next question. So when should personal biosecurity be carried out? So is it only if we see a biosecurity threat? Is it if there is signage indicating a biosecurity threat at the entrance to your chosen site asking you to carry it out, or at all times? And Nathaniel, what did your team say for this one?
C, at all times.
Fantastic. I think, yeah, we were the same within our group as well. So at all times. Good biosecurity practice never assumes that a site is free of biosecurity threats. We have no way of telling if a pest or disease is there. So we should always assume that it's riddled with them. Quite a number of pests and diseases, particularly in their early life stages, are so small that you can't see them. So here's a few examples. So ash dieback was discovered in the UK in 2011, but various lines of evidence suggest that it arrived sometime before 2003. So could it have been spread further and faster with poor biosecurity? Potentially. Phytophthora on this particular site, all the plants were destroyed in 2009. So all the hosts were taken out completely. And we had a colleague that went back year upon year, and even up until 2019, we were still finding Phytophthora alive in the soil samples we were taking. And then the last one, our new kid on the block, Phytophthora pluvialis, found in September 2021. We have no idea when it arrived. So anybody visiting sites where it has now been confirmed, there is the risk that they have spread it further. So this is a really good study that was carried out in New Zealand, looking at the souls of visitors coming into the airport. And it's a bit of a higher and lower game. So of all those visitors' footwear that were sampled, what percentage do we think carried seeds? Come on, shout a figure out to me. More than 50? Less than 50?
More than 50.
57%. Okay, we'll go higher or lower now. So of all the sampled footwear, what do we think carried nematodes? Higher or lower? Come on.
Higher.
Higher. What about bacteria? This may or may not surprise some of you. Higher, yeah, 100% of the sampled footwear carried bacteria. Fungi was only just below at 98%, and then 38% of the sampled footwear carried mesofauna, so small invertebrates between 0.1 and 2 millimeters in size. Okay, so hopefully that's kind of made it clear that we should be carrying out biosecurity. So what do we include in a personal biosecurity kit? What kind of key items do we think? AJ, what did your team have for this one? Did you manage to get all 5?
Maro actually took the lead. I was in Maro's group. So
oh, were you? Okay. Oh, sorry, we didn't have that many. So go on then. You let us know. Did they, if you can remember, did they have all 5?
Yeah. So if I can ask, unless you want to ask, AJ.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. So the answers were boot wash, and so with that implying the presence of water and a bucket, and then a brush, which was mentioned, and then also liquid disinfectants. And therefore, we also had the opportunity to discuss a little bit more, introduce our products that we currently use, the products that we currently use, such as clean kill and propeller, which are products that can be used after the items are washed. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant. So here is an example of the essential items of a biosecurity kit. And one thing that kind of came out of my group was where we should be carrying out biosecurity. And it's important that we carry out biosecurity before we leave a site. So ideally, we shouldn't be taking dirty footwear home to clean back at home, because you do run the risk of obviously spreading it back to your own area, your own gardens. And also, and I'm very happy to put my hand up and admit that I'm guilty of this, you forget quite often. You can forget, or you're in a rush the next time you need to go out and the boots just go on. So, you know, best practice is to carry out biosecurity on site. And you got it correct. So we want a stiff brush, a boot pick, a container to carry enough water for the day. I appreciate ideally you need to be in a car to be able to carry all of this, but we do provide, well, we don't provide, but you can get, we've worked with a company called Sorbus International to provide some little biosecurity light kits that you can carry on your back that come with a refillable small water container. A bucket big enough to submerge your foot in, something to clean your hands. And then additional items would be disinfectants, like Maro mentioned. And if you want to kind of spend some cash, then a pressure washer. Okay, so you finish carrying out personal biosecurity and need to dispose of your dirty water. Do we leave this on site, pour it down a drain, take it home, or pour it onto hard standing? And we ask you to think of two here. And the answers are to leave it on site. So like I said, we try and leave everything on site, leave it where you found it. And ideally it needs to be poured onto hard standing so that it can either evaporate or you could pour it back into the area where you've come from. So leave everything on site. There are some common personal biosecurity mistakes. And if you can see bottom right here, one of them is tipping water into a nearby watercourse. So any cleaning should be done at least 10 meters away from a watercourse. But a few other common mistakes are not taking your footwear off to clean them. This hurts your back. It makes it a lot more difficult. So have a spare pair of footwear in the car. And if we do come and see you in person to deliver a pest and disease walk or some other kind of training, then we're happy to kind of run through our kit and how we go about cleaning. Spraying disinfectant, if you do decide to use it onto a dirty sole, this just won't work. It's ineffective. You need to make sure that the sole is completely clean, visibly clean, before spraying with disinfectant. And like I say, disinfectant is just an extra. If you're working on sites that have been given a plant health notice, you may be required to use disinfectants, but otherwise water and a stiff brush is the best you can do. And then,
sorry to interrupt.
Go for it.
I just thought I'd confess that in my team, we forgot the boot pick for the biosecurity equipment, which is, you know, one of those examples there. And we also, I either wrote it down wrong, but I didn't pick up on this at the time, but they actually selected to pour the water down a drain, which again is just a common mistake because you don't think that the water actually still goes back into the watercourse. So it's good to see those common mistakes.
Yeah, no, good point. And we within our team as well, we mentioned pouring the water down a drain. So yeah, if we can avoid drains, avoid water courses and aim for hard standing or just a patch of ground, it's fine if it's from where you've just been walking. It's not a problem. It's not like you're making the situation worse. You've come from that site, so leave it on that site. And then the final, on this slide, the final mistake is not dislodging any stones or maybe leaf litter that's built up in the tread of your shoe. Of your footwear. I'm just conscious of time, don't worry, we've got a couple of minutes, we will finish on time. You can go as far as kind of choosing your kit to make it more biosecurity friendly, so thinking about the tread on your footwear and how easy it is to clean. Selecting a bucket that you can actually fully submerge your boot into makes it a lot easier. Thinking about the brushes, a long handled brush is much easier. It saves your back a little bit, and also if you picked up any nasties on the sole of your shoe, you're not getting your hands anywhere near it. And then there's these optional extras which do make life a lot easier. And then another common personal biosecurity mistake is not cleaning your cleaning equipment. So make sure that you give that a rinse down, and if you're using disinfectant, a spray. And then nearly there, which pathway spreads biosecurity threats further and faster? And if you were listening to my presentation at the beginning, you'll all know that this is human assisted. And this is a nice little diagram that just clearly shows how easy pests and diseases do spread around. So Anne within my team mentioned that one of her tasks is to remove infected ash saplings. So obviously coming into direct contact with infected trees, and how easy it is then to move that disease around in infected material and pass on to another, potentially onto another host. But we can break this chain by carrying out good biosecurity. Some of you may be familiar with some of these key campaigns, and I'll send Carol information on these. We've got some fantastic resources, and we're always available to help with any kind of biosecurity kits and things like that if you want to pull them together. And then finally, the last question: you spot a tree with symptoms that look suspicious of a harmful non-native pest. What should you do? Nothing. Take a photo, submit a report to Tree Alert, or write to the Forestry Commission. And Nathaniel did a fantastic job at explaining how we would like reports to come in, and how we can then action and go out and kind of triage those. And that is through submitting a report through Tree Alert. And always, if you can, if you've got a smartphone or a camera with you, snap away. Even if you think it's nothing, take pictures. Just a snapshot of the new Tree Alert website. Do go on and have a little nosy. There's some great resources and links on there. And then just a nod to Observatory as well, where there is some fantastic, Nathaniel mentioned some field ID guides, webinars. If you just want to know a little bit more about a particular pest or disease, or you may wish to sign up to be a volunteer in the future. They're not recruiting at the moment because they're inundated with requests, but you can put your name, I think, on a waiting list, or at least join the newsletter. And then finally, there is e-learning modules available if you do want to go and learn a bit more about biosecurity or invasive non-native species. But that's it. I mean, we're happy to add up points, which we can do at a later date. And if and when we come and see you, hopefully in person, to maybe run a pest and disease walk, we could bring the winning team a prize. So I'm going to stop there because I am very conscious that we're now 1 minute over time. So I'm going to stop sharing, and thank you all for listening. And I hope you had an enjoyable afternoon, and I hope we get invited back. Thanks, Carol.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Becky, and to all of you for coming and informing us. I know it's made me think a great deal about the practices that we undertake at YDMT and some changes we perhaps need to make. So yeah, I will send out a feedback form to everyone that's attended this afternoon, and we'll be asking, you know, in the future, if you think it would be good for Becky and the team to come out and do a live walk with us. I think we could perhaps look at setting some of those up in the future. So yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed it and learned something. All right.